The sound of steel hitting wood echoes through the mess hall. A tray lands on the table in front of them, and steam rises from mashed potatoes so white they look almost unreal. Thick gravy pools in a crater at the center, and beside it sits a slice of cornbread glistening with butter, golden as late summer sun. The women stare at it without moving, without breathing. One of them, her voice barely a whisper, asks what they're all thinking. "We're supposed to share this for a week." The guard standing nearby doesn't laugh. He doesn't understand why they're frozen there, why their hands won't reach forward. After months of boiled weeds and bread made from sawdust, after potato peels fought over like treasure and children who forgot what sugar tasted like, the sheer abundance before them looks impossible. It looks almost cruel. In 1945, as German women prisoners were shipped to American-run camps across occupied Europe, the war that had devoured the continent was finally over. But what began next was stranger than victory or defeat. It was disbelief. The camera finds a ration tin on the table, stamped with the words US Army in block letters. The label reads, "Beef stew 16 ounces." For the first time in their lives, they were prisoners in a country that didn't hate them. April 1945, the convoy stops near Bremen, and the war is technically over, though nobody has told the smoke still rising from the city or the bodies still warm in the rubble. The women climb down from the trucks with their hands visible, their faces grey with exhaustion and something worse than fear. They are nurses, clerks, auxiliaries, women who typed reports and bandaged wounds and believed, or tried to believe, they were serving their country's wounded and not its ideology. Liselle is 26 years old. She has red-rimmed eyes and hands that shake when she thinks no one is looking. She was a Red Cross nurse, and she told herself every day that medicine has no politics, that saving a life is saving a life. She told herself this even when the lives she couldn't save outnumbered the ones she could, even when the Reich's promises turned to ash in her mouth. The American soldiers process them with a strange efficiency. They are polite in a way that feels more frightening than anger would be. Cold, but not cruel. The women wait for brutality, for revenge, for the humiliation they were taught to expect from an enemy drunk on victory. None comes. Instead, they are herded into the backs of trucks, and someone hands out cigarettes. American cigarettes. A soldier tells them in broken German that they'll be taken care of. Liselle watches one young soldier bend down to pick up something from the mud, a photograph. He wipes it carefully on his sleeve before handing it back to the woman who dropped it. It's a picture of a child. The soldier's hands are gentle. That detail sticks with Liselle like a splinter she can't remove. She was taught that Americans were savages, that they would come with torches and laughter. But this boy from somewhere she's never heard of treats a photograph like it matters. The trucks roll through countryside that looks sick with spring, past fields that should be green, but are scarred with craters and the skeletons of machines. They arrive at a camp in France as evening falls, and it's spotless in a way that makes Liselle's stomach turn. Neat rows of barracks, electric lights that actually work, wooden floors that don't sink into mud when you step on them. After years of cities crumbling and hospitals running out of morphine and children dying for want of bread, the order here feels obscene. They stand in a line as soldiers check their names against lists. Liselle feels exhaustion pulling at her bones like gravity, but underneath it runs a current of confusion that won't let her rest. Where is the hatred? Where is the price of surrender? All around her, women whisper theories. The Americans are saving them for show trials. They'll ship them to Siberia. They'll separate the nurses from the rest and shoot them at dawn. None of the theories account for the cigarettes, or the careful hands, or the way the guards look more bored than vengeful. The barracks smell like pine and disinfectant. Real disinfectant. Not the homemade lye soap they'd been using for years. The women are processed through delousing stations, catalogued, assigned bunk numbers. They whisper to each other in the dark, after the lights go out at 10 o'clock sharp. Irmgard, who is young and still devout in a way that makes Liselle ache with memory, is convinced the Americans will experiment on them, use them for medical trials. Someone else suggests they're being fattened for labor camps. The theories grow more elaborate in the darkness, but nobody can explain the silence. Nobody screams here. Nobody beats them. The quiet feels unnatural, like waiting for thunder that never comes. Morning arrives with light through real windows and the sound of a bell instead of shouting. They're told to line up for breakfast, and they file into a mess hall that smells like a dream Liselle forgot she used to have. Coffee. Real coffee. Not the roasted grain water they'd been pretending was coffee for 3 years. On the tables, eggs. Bread thick enough to bite without it crumbling to dust. Butter yellow as childhood. The women stand at the tables and stare. Liesel feels her throat close. Beside her, Irmgard starts to cry and the sound is small and broken. "They're mocking us," she whispers. "They're showing us what they have and what we've lost." The guard nearby shrugs, confused by their paralysis. He says simply, "Eat." Liesel finally reaches out. Her hand shakes as she picks up a piece of bread. She brings it to her mouth and takes a bite. And she almost gags. Not from the taste. The taste is better than anything she's eaten in years. She gags from guilt. Her brother died last winter. He died after weeks of eating nothing but potato peels and hope. He died while she was at a field hospital, running out of supplies, running out of time, running out of reasons to believe any of it mattered. And here is bread. Here is butter. Here is abundance so complete it feels like accusation. She swallows. It sits in her stomach like a stone. Around her, other women are crying or eating in silence or staring at their plates like they might disappear. The guard watches them with an expression that moves from confusion to something that might be pity, and that's worse somehow. Liesel realizes that in this strange new world, food is not comfort. Food is confrontation. Every bite asks a question she doesn't know how to answer. The days begin to blur together, but the meals remain sharp and impossible. 3 times a day, they are confronted with more food than makes sense. The narrator's voice cuts through, providing context that makes everything worse. Each prisoner of war was allocated 3,000 calories per day, according to Geneva Convention rules. 3,000 calories, more than most German civilians had seen in years. More than Liesel's brother had in his last 6 months of life combined. She lies in her bunk at night and remembers. The hospital in Hamburg where she worked before the end. The civilians who came in starving. Their children with bellies swollen from hunger and eyes that had forgotten how to hope. She remembers treating them with medicines she didn't have. Watching them die from deprivation while the radio played speeches about final victory and the righteousness of their cause. She remembers propaganda films shown to boost morale. Films that depicted the Allies as monsters who would rape and murder their way across Germany, who would take pleasure in German suffering. And now she is their prisoner, and they feed her eggs for breakfast. The war had not ended with surrender. It had ended with revelation. She overhears American guards joking with each other about German efficiency, and the women nearby stiffen, certain it's mockery. But Liesel listens closer and realizes they're talking about how to organize the work details, admiring how quickly the German women have learned the camp routine. It's not cruelty, it's just conversation. The cruelty, she thinks, might actually be easier to understand. A small moment becomes a turning point. Liesel is in the camp infirmary watching when an American medic treats a woman's frostbite. The woman's feet are damaged from the winter, from the long walk west as the Reich collapsed around them. The medic's hands are careful and professional. When he touches her ankle, the woman flinches like she expects pain. He pauses, meets her eyes and says something in English. His tone is gentle. He goes back to bandaging, slower this time, letting her see each movement before he makes it. Liesel watches this and feels something crack inside her chest. These are not the monsters she was taught to fear. These are boys who miss their mothers, doing a job that happens to include kindness because kindness is simply what they know how to do. That night, the women argue in low voices. One says the Americans want to fatten them before trial, make them comfortable before punishment. Another says no, they feed them because they can, because they have so much abundance that even their enemies eat well. That's worse, someone whispers. And Liesel understands exactly what she means. It's worse because it reveals how much was a lie. It's worse because every meal is proof of how thoroughly they were betrayed by their own government, their own propaganda, their own certainty that they were righteous. The next morning, Liesel volunteers to help in the infirmary. It's her first act of choice since the capture. The first time she's raised her hand for something other than survival. The American medics accept her without ceremony, showing her where supplies are kept, treating her like a colleague rather than a prisoner. It's disorienting. It's the strangest kindness she's ever known. Days turn into weeks, and routine settles over them like dust. There are work details, laundry lines strung between barracks, flapping with sheets in the wind. Medical duties for those like Liesel who have training. The physical work is easier than anything they endured during the war, and that fact alone feels like an indictment. Liesel finds herself in the camp kitchen one afternoon, helping to prepare vegetables. The cook is an American corporal named James, and he's amused by the German women's continued disbelief at the food supplies. He asks Liesel about German bread, and she describes the dense rye loaves her grandmother used to make, the ones you could keep for weeks if you stored them right. He writes down her instructions in a little notebook, his handwriting careful and childish. He tells her about his mother's pies back in Ohio, apple and cherry, and something called pecan that Liselle has never heard of. They trade recipes like people who have never tried to kill each other, like it's normal. She learns that the American soldiers are barely older than she is. Boys from Kansas and Ohio and places with names that sound made up. They show her photographs of girls back home, of family farms, of main streets in small towns. They ask if she's ever had a Hershey bar. She almost laughs. Only in dreams, she tells them, and they think she's joking until they see her face. One of them gives her a chocolate bar the next day. She holds it like it might explode. That night, she breaks off a piece and puts it in her mouth. And the sweetness is so overwhelming she has to sit down. She thinks of her brother, who dreamed of chocolate in his last weeks. She thinks of the children at the hospital who would have traded anything for a taste of sugar. She eats it anyway, and the guilt tastes worse than the chocolate tastes good. Irmgard is getting worse. She refuses to eat American food, convinced that accepting it is a form of surrender. She picks at her meals and grows thin, and her eyes develop a feverish brightness that Liesl recognizes from the hospital. One evening, Liesl brings her a cup of milk, fresh and cold in a way that seems like witchcraft. "Drink," she says. "Not for them. For me." Irmgard looks at the cup like it's a test. "They want to erase what we were," she whispers. "They want to keep us alive," Liesl says, and realizes she believes it. The narrator observes, "Every act of kindness was an accusation. Every meal, every blanket, every moment of ordinary decency revealed the depth of the lies they had lived inside. The Americans were not re-educating them through speeches or propaganda. They were doing it through the radical simplicity of treating them like human beings." Liesl begins to understand that mercy can be a form of devastation. It's harder to hate someone who feeds you. It's harder to cling to old certainties when they dissolve daily in the face of small, repeated kindnesses. She watches Irmgard drink the milk in tiny sips, and she sees the girl's resistance crumbling like old bread. And she knows her own resistance crumbled weeks ago. November arrives cold and clear, and the Americans announce there will be a special meal. Thanksgiving, they call it. A holiday about gratitude and harvest, about pilgrims and Indians and abundance. The concept is foreign, but the intent is clear. They want to share their celebration. They invite the German prisoners to join them in the mess hall. The women refuse at first. It feels like too much, like crossing a line they can't uncross. But Liesl insists they go. "We can sit at their table without surrendering," she says, though she's not sure she believes it anymore. "We can be present without being grateful." That too is a lie she tells herself. They file into the mess hall that evening, and the sight stops them cold. Turkey, enormous and golden, carved by soldiers who laugh as they work. Mashed potatoes in quantities that seem criminally wasteful. Something red and jellied that James tells her is cranberry sauce. Pies. Multiple pies, their crusts perfectly browned, their fillings rich and sweet. The tables groan under the weight of it all. The women take their seats in silence. A young prisoner, barely 18, stares at her plate and whispers the words that will echo through memory. "We're supposed to share this for a week." James is serving next to her. He laughs, soft and brief, thinking it's a joke. Then he sees her face. He sees the genuine confusion, the incomprehension, the way her eyes are bright with tears that haven't fallen yet. His smile fades. "No," he says quietly. "This is just for tonight." Liesl looks around the hall. American soldiers are eating and joking with each other. A radio plays swing music, and some of the younger ones are dancing between the tables, drunk on youth and survival. There's warmth here. There's life here. There's a kind of easy happiness that she forgot could exist, and she feels it all at once. The shame of survival, the relief of safety, the hunger that goes deeper than empty stomach, and the terrifying, liberating idea that these men who were her enemies are good, simply good, without complication or compromise. Images flash through her mind like photographs on fire. Bombed cities with children's shoes scattered in the rubble, starving faces pressed against hospital windows, propaganda posters showing Allied soldiers as demons, the voice of the Führer promising victory until the moment he disappeared into silence, all of it collapsing now under the weight of a fork scraping porcelain, under the sound of men laughing about football and girls back home, under the simple fact that they are being fed, not because they earned it, but because it's the decent thing to do. Liesl picks up her fork. She cuts into the turkey, and it's tender and perfect. She takes a bite, then another. She eats freely for the first time since the capture, and the tears fall silently into her mashed potatoes. Around her, other women are crying too, and eating, and some are laughing in the bewildered way of people who have forgotten how. The Americans don't comment on the tears. They just keep passing plates, Keep offering seconds. Keep treating them like dinner guests instead of prisoners. That night, the war in her ended. Not with surrender, but with appetite. Not with defeat, but with the admission that she had been wrong about so much. The enemy was human. The monsters were elsewhere. And kindness, she learned, is the strangest weapon of all, because you can't defend against it. You can only let it change you. The weeks that follow are quieter. The women settle into routines that feel less like imprisonment and more like a strange limbo between past and future. They work, they eat, they sleep in warm barracks while winter settles over the camp. News filters in from Germany. Cities in ruins, refugees flooding the roads. The scale of destruction too vast to comprehend from this distance. One morning in late November, the camp commander announces that they'll begin releasing prisoners. Those with families to return to, places to go, some kind of life to rebuild. Liselle sits with the news like a weight on her chest. She should be relieved. She should be desperate to leave, to go home, to find whatever's left of the life she had. Instead, she hesitates. The camp feels more stable than anything waiting for her in Germany. Here there is order, routine, enough food. Out there is chaos and rubble, and the hard work of survival without certainty or safety. James finds her in the infirmary the next day. He's holding something wrapped in cloth. "For the journey," he says, and unwraps it to reveal a ration tin. US Army stamped on the lid. Beef stew, the same kind they had that first overwhelming breakfast. She shakes her head. "I can't. Just a can," he says. "Not charity, just something to remember that you survived." She takes it because refusing would be more complicated than accepting. That night, before they're loaded into trucks for the journey home, she walks to the edge of the camp where a line of trees marks the boundary. She digs a shallow hole with her hands and buries the tin there. She can't bring it home. Kindness is heavy luggage for those who were taught only to obey. The weight of mercy is something she'll carry inside her, but the symbol of it she leaves behind, hidden under earth and leaves. Irmgard is recovering. She's gained back some of the weight she lost during her resistance, and her eyes are clearer now. The night before they leave, Liselle watches her eat a full meal without hesitation, without guilt. "I used to think they were the monsters," Irmgard whispers afterward, staring at her empty plate. She doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't need to. The narrator's voice widens the lens. Tens of thousands of German prisoners of war would return home, carrying stories not of vengeance, but of confusion. The confusion of being treated humanely by the enemy, the bewilderment of mercy, and it was that confusion, that forced confrontation with their own propaganda and lies, that built the foundation for peace. Not treaties or reparations or borders redrawn, but the simple, undeniable fact that Americans had fed them when they could have starved them, had treated them like people when they could have treated them like criminals. 1947. Hamburg is a city trying to remember what it used to be. Liesel works as a nurse in a clinic that operates out of a building missing half its roof. They patch it with tarps and keep working. Every day brings new patients, people sick from malnutrition or injury, or the countless ways war keeps killing long after the fighting stops. She does what she can with what she has. It's more than she had during the war, but less than she had in the camp. That thought comes to her sometimes, and she pushes it away. She's walking through a square one afternoon when she sees an American aid truck distributing food to children. There's a line of them, thin and solemn, waiting their turns. She stops to watch. An aid worker hands a chocolate bar to a small girl, maybe 6 years old. The girl holds it carefully, like something precious and fragile. She stares at it for a long moment before slowly unwrapping one corner. She hesitates again before taking the smallest bite possible, letting it melt on her tongue. Liesel sees herself in that hesitation. The impossibility of abundance. The guilt of receiving what so many others didn't live to receive. The strange, complicated feeling of being saved by the people you were taught to hate. She smiles faintly, and the expression feels strange on her face, like a language half forgotten and slowly relearned. She walks on through the ruins of the city, past buildings held together by hope and scaffolding, past women clearing rubble with their bare hands, past children who are learning to play again among the wreckage. The world is broken, but it's being rebuilt, not by armies or governments, but by ordinary people doing ordinary work, surviving, adapting, learning, slowly and painfully, what it means to be human in the aftermath of inhumanity. Wars end in treaties, the narrator observes, signatures on paper, borders on maps, dates in history books. But peace begins with meals shared by people who don't yet know they're human again. It begins with kindness that can't be explained by strategy or propaganda. It begins with the bewildering realization that the enemy feeds you not because you deserve it, but because they can't imagine doing anything else. The camera finds a weathered ration tin, half buried in the dirt near a stand of trees in France. US Army, 1945. The words are fading, but still visible. Above ground, spring is returning. The trees are budding. The camp is gone. Now, torn down or repurposed, but the earth remembers what was buried there. They had been prisoners, but for the first time in their lives, they were prisoners of kindness. And that was the kind of captivity that set them free.